This video will be looking at the impact of climate change on typhoid fever. Today we'll be looking at what typhoid fever is, the role of climate change in the prevalence of typhoid fever, the distribution and people who are most vulnerable to it, what puts you at risk of getting typhoid fever, and how typhoid fever can be prevented. Typhoid fever is a waterborne disease. It is caused by infection of a type of bacteria called Salmonella typhi. Where do these bacteria live? These bacteria can be shed in your feces or urine after or during an infection. This means a major source of Salmonella typhi is food and water contaminated by human fecal matter. When in the body, typhoid bacteria like to live in your gut. Through the bloodstream, typhoid bacteria can spread to other organs, like the lungs and kidneys. How do you get typhoid fever? These bacteria can be transmitted to another person through contaminated food, contaminated water, and contaminated sewage which carries the bacteria. This is why it is called a waterborne disease.
After infecting a human host, the bacteria that causes typhoid makes its home inside the gut. The gut is a system of organs that processes the food we eat and converts our body's wastes into the feces that we excrete. This means that each time an infected individual passes stool, they'll also be passing the harmful bacteria in their gut with it. Therefore, the main way you can get typhoid is by somehow ingesting the feces of someone with the disease. While this might seem pretty unlikely, it's actually alarmingly easy to do. That's because even the smallest amount of fecal ingestion could introduce enough of these tiny bacteria to make you sick. This method of spread from person to person is called fecal-oral transmission, which can happen in a number of ways.
Such as by ingesting water or soil that has come into contact with infected feces, eating food that has been prepared or touched by someone who has typhoid fever and has not washed their hands after going to the bathroom, eating uncooked fruits and vegetables which may have been grown on farms that use untreated sewage water or contaminated soil. Another way you can get typhoid fever is through the actions of insects and animals. These animals come into contact with infected feces and then spread to food and other surfaces. When we touch these surfaces and then touch our mouths or eat food, we get infected. How does climate change increase our risk of getting typhoid fever? Climate change refers to the change in the Earth's weather patterns through time. In recent years, the change in our climate is primarily from human activity. We have caused a rise in sea and land surface temperatures, producing heavy rainfall and rapid sea ice loss. This has increased sea levels and the risk of flooding. Flooding causes different water bodies to mix and typhoid bacteria to spread to surface waters and other sources used for daily living, therefore increasing the risk of contracting typhoid fever.
There are many areas where the risk of contracting typhoid is increased. The study of where, when, and who diseases such as typhoid affect is known as epidemiology. And when looking at epidemiology, there are three areas that are important to address. Distribution of the disease, so where in the world can one find the most affected people? Incidence, meaning the number of typhoid cases per 100,000 people. And lastly, who are most at risk of contracting the disease. According to the World Health Organization, in 2017, 14.3 million cases of typhoid occurred worldwide, and an estimated 136,000 died from the disease. The areas most affected were countries with low income living and subsequent poor sanitation. And despite the ongoing improvements in sub-Saharan Africa, South and Southeast Asia, and Oceania, these areas are still at most risk for typhoid. The global incidence of typhoid sits around 198 people per 100,000. Although proper robust surveillance systems to record and observe typhoid worldwide are still being developed, it has been estimated that Oceania and South Asia remain the areas of the highest incidence of typhoid fever, especially South Asia with an incidence of 549 per 100,000. When considering who is most at risk, typhoid is found to be most common in children. Also, in children under 5 years, typhoid fever is usually sufficiently severe to warrant both outpatient and inpatient care, and poor outcomes of typhoid are linked to ineffective or delayed treatment. On the other hand, there are also many risk factors that can determine which groups are most at risk, regardless of age.
There are a number of risk factors for typhoid fever. Personal risk factors include coming into contact with an already infected person, traveling to an endemic country such as Africa, China, India, Indonesia, and Pakistan, poor personal hygiene habits such as improper hand and body washing, other medical conditions such as diabetes, and also not being vaccinated can increase your risk of developing typhoid fever. Typhoid fever is spread through poo found in food and water. This is more likely to occur in areas with a larger population, poor hygiene, lack of clean drinking water supplies, and improper waste disposal. A majority of these areas are found in countries such as Southeast Asia, Sub-Saharan Africa, and South America. Low and middle income countries that lack poor sanitation are also high-risk areas for the spread of typhoid fever.
What does typhoid fever look like? Early signs of the disease include headache, fever, muscle aches, a cough, and constipation. Late signs include loss of appetite, bloated stomach, diarrhea, a rash on the chest, stomach, or back, seizures, and facial twitching.
If left untreated, 1 in 5 people with typhoid fever will unfortunately die. Death is often due to the shock, internal bleeding, and organ damage that the typhoid bacteria can cause if the infection goes unchecked. So, if you or anyone else in your care start to show the symptoms of typhoid, you need to seek medical help as soon as possible. The good news is that if you get proper treatment early, you have a really good chance of making a full recovery. After reaching out to the doctor or another healthcare professional, you'll usually need to get a blood test done or provide a stool sample to confirm that you've been infected by the typhoid bacteria. Once this is done, you'll probably get sent home with some antibiotic tablets, as well as some instructions on how long you need to take them for. In most cases, this will be for around 7 to 14 days. It's really important that you take this medication as per your doctor's instructions for however long you've been advised. Although your symptoms may improve vastly before you've even finished your full course of antibiotics, some of the tiny salmonella bacteria may still be surviving in your gut. If you stop taking your medication, these bacteria can cause your symptoms to come back, or you could pass on your infection to other people. It's also important to keep in mind that not everyone with typhoid fever will be able to recover from home. If you have severe symptoms, like frequent vomiting and diarrhea, or a swollen stomach, you may need to be admitted to hospital. You'll get antibiotics, fluids, and nutrients to maintain your health, delivered directly through a drip into your veins. Chances are you'll feel better within about 3 to 5 days, but it may take several weeks for you to recover enough to leave hospital. For a very small number of patients who have organ damage and internal bleeding from serious typhoid infections, surgery might be needed. No matter what your condition though, treatment with antibiotics is essential. But there are also a few things you can do at home to manage your symptoms. Here are some top tips. Number 1, drink plenty of fluids and water to keep yourself hydrated. 2, use a cloth damp with cool water on your forehead, armpits, feet, and hands to fight the fever. 3, eat some garlic, raw or softly cooked. 4, have some basil infused with tea, boiled with water, or with honey. 5, drink some apple cider vinegar. 6, eat some bananas. And 7, eat some oranges to boost your immune system. Due warning though, you should try these strategies in addition to, not as a replacement for, proper medical treatment. After you've been treated for typhoid, you may need to get a few more tests done just to make sure that you're no longer carrying the bacteria. Get that confirmation? And you're in the clear. Just remember though, if you do start feeling sick again, go back to the doctor. You might need a little bit more treatment.
There are a number of ways that the spread of typhoid fever can be slowed down. These include providing access to clean water, promoting water safety by barricading supplies so that it won't get contaminated, increasing hygiene practices amongst food handlers in endemic countries, better sanitation infrastructure, ensuring adequate access to healthcare and treatment, and providing education on personal hygiene such as proper hand washing techniques. So what can you do to slow the spread of typhoid fever? Make sure to wash your hands frequently for 20 seconds after going to the toilet, when you come home, and also before you start to prepare food. Make sure to get vaccinated and wash all fruits and vegetables with clean filtered water before eating them. Make sure to visit your local GP if you are feeling feverish or unwell. If you are recovering from typhoid fever, make sure to take your medications as required. Before drinking any water, make sure to boil it first. Do not pass stool in public places and near any waterways. Do not eat raw food. If you are sick, do not prepare food for other people. If you are traveling to endemic countries, do not eat from street vendors. Avoid anyone who is showing symptoms of having typhoid fever.
Now we're going to look at how climate change affects the prevalence of infectious diseases. We said that climate change is a change in the Earth's weather patterns over time, but recently, human activity has accelerated climate change. This means land and sea surface temperatures have spiked, heavy rainfall has increased, and sea levels have risen. This results in flooding. Flooding can interrupt clean water supplies and sanitation, break up populations, and cause overcrowding. Flooding means different water bodies mix, giving the opportunity for bacteria to travel to sources used for daily living. Data shows that waterborne epidemics have peaked with the increasing number of flood events. It's important to understand that typhoid fever is not the only disease which poses an increased risk because of climate change-induced effects. We all need to become aware of how climate change can affect human health. Now, just to make sure you've been paying attention, let's go through a few questions. When traveling to a country with endemic typhoid fever, you should A. Eat from street vendors, B. Get vaccinated before your travel, or C. Drink unfiltered water. The answer is C. Always make sure you get vaccinated before you travel. Eating from street vendors can be risky. You don't always know how food is prepared, so it's better to be safe than sorry. Street vendors may have bad hygiene practices or deal with contaminated food. As mentioned earlier, a major source of typhoid fever is from contaminated water and food. It is important to get your vaccinations before you travel so you're protected against typhoid fever. Unfiltered water could be swarming with dangerous bacteria like the typhoid bacteria. Make sure your water is clean before consuming it. What should you do to help stop the spread of typhoid fever? A. Pass stool in public places. B. Eat raw food. C. Boil water before drinking it. Or D. Eat food without washing your hands. The answer is C. Make sure you always boil your water before drinking it, as this can kill the typhoid bacteria. Do not pass stool in public places. The bacteria that cause typhoid fever can be found in the feces of infected individuals. Always make sure you practice good hygiene to prevent the spread of typhoid fever and endangering your community. Make sure you avoid raw food. These may have been washed with contaminated water and carry bacteria which can infect you. Always make sure you wash your hands before eating with clean water to prevent the contamination of food. It is extremely important to practice good hygiene to prevent the transmission of diseases like typhoid fever. Which of the following is an early sign of typhoid fever? A. Headache. B. Loss of appetite. C. Diarrhea. Or D. A rash. The answer is A. An early sign of typhoid fever is usually a headache. You can get typhoid fever from A. Eating uncooked vegetables, B. Drinking contaminated water, C. Eating food without washing your hands after touching a contaminated surface, or D. All of the above. The answer is D. All of these practices promote the contamination of food and water and transmission of typhoid fever. Always make sure you practice good hygiene and look at what you are consuming. What is the most important thing to do if you start experiencing symptoms of typhoid fever? A. Stay at home and wait for symptoms to eventually subside. B. Apply cold compress to bring down your fever. C. Take herbal remedies like garlic and basil to ease your symptoms. Or D. Seek medical attention from a doctor. The answer is D. Always make sure you seek medical attention from a doctor. They are professionals trained in dealing with these problems and will know what is best for you. What should you do when you've been prescribed a course of antibiotics for your typhoid? A. You should leave the medicine untouched and opt instead for natural remedies. B. Take the antibiotics for as long as your doctor has ordered and finish the entire course. Or C. Start by taking the antibiotics as ordered and stop taking the medication when symptoms have subsided. The answer is D. Always make sure you seek medical attention from a doctor. They are professionals trained in dealing with these problems and will know what is best for you. Always take the antibiotics for as long as your doctor has ordered. This will stop the infection from returning as well as reduce the risk of the bacteria becoming resistant to the antibiotics. Thanks for watching our video. We hope you found it helpful.